actually will start out by leading the pledge. If everyone could put their hands over their hearts and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thanks very much, everyone. Lynette, could you please call the roll?
Yes, good morning. Just a few housekeeping tips before we get started here. Wanted to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded, and members of the board who are participating by telephone, if you would like to make a public comment or a comment at any time or a question, press *9 on your telephone, and that will give you access to make a comment. Also, please make sure that you're muting your devices when you're not speaking so that we don't pick up any background noise. Board members, if you are accessing the meeting through Zoom online, you can also, under the participant button, you can click on raise your hand to make a comment as well. We have staff that are monitoring that to make sure that we see your raised hand. So today is Thursday, April 16th. Again, this meeting is being recorded and it's being streamed on our website for members of the public. They are able to submit comments through email to me, which I will be monitoring throughout the meeting. I'll go ahead and take roll now. Director Allard.
Here. Here.
Cabalden.
Here.
Douglas.
Present.
Flores.
Present.
Frericks.
Here.
Yes. Frost.
Here.
Dialdo.
Here.
Gore.
Here.
Harris. I'll have the record show that Harris is present. I see his name on the list as online. Jankovitz.
Here.
Jennings.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Kozlowski.
Here.
Leahy.
Here.
Lozano. I think he's joining us in a few minutes. New. I'll have the record show that New is present. I see his name. Onderko. Absent. Peters. I see Director Peters' names. I'll note her for the record. Samayoa.
Here.
Sander.
Here.
Zaragoza. I see his name as well. Saylor.
Here.
Chenier. I see his name as well. Slowey.
Here.
Foley.
Here.
Ballard.
Here.
Soon.
Here.
Pixa.
Here.
Beercam.
Here.
West. West absent, and ex officio member Fong for Benny Pa.
Here.
Thank you. That completes the roll call.
Actually, West is here.
Oh, thank you very much. Sorry about that.
And Lynette, Sean Harris, I just signed on.
Yes, I've marked you present. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Great. Good. Well, good morning, everyone. So we're just going to move on to public communications. So this is a time for anyone who wishes to address the board on an item that does not appear elsewhere on this agenda. Lynette, have we received any public comments via email, or is there a member of the public participating via phone that wishes to comment?
I have not received any public comment, Chair Ferrix.
Okay,
And
great. And we're anyone on the phone from? Not hearing any.
no.
Great, thank you. So now we will switch gears to the consent calendar. So of course, the consent items are intended to be approved in one motion. However, obviously anyone can remove any item for a separate discussion. First question, does any director wish to remove an item from the consent calendar? Not hearing any. Lynette, is there anyone from the public on the line who wishes to remove an item from for public comment?
I don't know anyone on the line, Chair Ferrix.
Great, thank you.
Move
Appreciate
approval
that.
of the consent calendar.
We have a motion by
second.
Stallard. We have a Slowey second. So motion by Stallard, second by Slowey. Any further questions, comments, or discussion? Hearing none, we will move to roll call.
Thank you. And thank you for your patience while we move through this. Director Allard,
Yes.
Alden,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Flores,
Yes.
Chair Ferrix,
Yes.
Frost,
Aye.
Gallardo,
Yes.
Gore,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Jankovitz,
Yes.
Jennings.
Is that Jennings?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. Joyner,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Kozlowski,
Yes.
Leahy,
Yes.
Lozano. I'll mark him as still absent. New. Director New, are you there? If you can indicate aye or nay. Oh, we'll move on. Derko. I'll mark him as still absent. Peters.
Lynette, I believe that Director Peters just rejoined the meeting. If you don't mind giving her a second to.
Yes, I'm here.
Sure. Thank you, Director Peters. Could you indicate how you vote on the consent calendar?
I couldn't hear it. It said I was on hold for voice. So
Oh.
I'm going to abstain because I didn't hear
apologize.
what you were talking about.
Okay, thank you. I'll mark you as abstention. Samayoa,
That's it, yes.
Sander,
Aye.
Zaragoza, okay, I'll mark him as absent. Saylor,
Aye.
Chenier, Director Chenier, are you there? If you could indicate your vote. I'll move on. Slowey,
Aye. Aye.
Oakley, Ballard,
Aye.
okay, moving on soon. Tixa,
Aye. Aye.
Veerkamp,
Yes.
thank you.
Your
Veerkamp,
camp is, Camp, aye.
West?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Great, thanks very much for that. So now moving on to our action items. Item 7 is approval of the final 2021 Regional Active Transportation Program Policy Framework. And Victoria is going to present this item.
Thank you, Chair Frericks. I'm pulling her into the meeting right now.
Thank you.
Hi, Victoria. Can you verify that you can hear and see us?
Hello?
Victoria?
Pierre is on.
All right, thanks very much, Pierre. Just hang tight there. You can put yourself on mute. We're going to have a presentation here in a second.
Hi.
Hello,
Hi, Victoria.
this is Victoria. Hi. For some reason, my phone is, or my computer is not accepting the board of directors meeting Zoom setup. I hope this is okay for me to continue like this.
Yes,
should I start video so you can see me on my phone though?
If whatever works better for you, and we're ready for your item whenever you are ready to proceed.
Okay, I will start with my talking points. So, good morning. This is Victoria Cacciatore. Thank you for having me here today. I'm here to present a recommendation to the board on the final Regional Active Transportation Program Policy Framework. As a bit of background, the Active Transportation Program is a funding program for projects that will increase biking and walking. State law requires that at least 25% of ATP funding go to projects that benefit disadvantaged community residents. SACOG is responsible for developing the scoring criteria and evaluation process that further adapt the state ATP to implement our regional goals and policies. We work with El Dorado County Transportation Commission and Placer County Transportation Planning Agency to do this. The board is requested to approve the policy framework today if the presented changes meet your approval. I presented a draft framework in early March where the different board committees provide the direction to incorporate Green Means Go into the evaluation criteria and to strengthen the regional commitment to investing in disadvantaged communities. I worked with staff from EDCTC and PCTPA to find ways to develop the policy framework in a way that would address these comments from the board, and there are 3 revisions to present to you today. For the disadvantaged community benefit request, there's new language that would identify a regional target for 35% investment in disadvantaged communities. The regional target of 35% is separate from the state requirement of 25%. However, the scoring process would still use the 25% investment threshold as the trigger for adding in the 0 to 10 disadvantaged community benefit points and re-ranking the entire list for funding prioritization. For Green Means Go, there is new language under the greenhouse gas reduction criterion to show that projects demonstrating consistency with Green Means Go will be given special consideration. This adaptation into the policy framework was made in acknowledgement of how Green Means Go is on the cusp of a lot of additional outreach to local agencies, and there are a lot of unknowns around it. However, it should still send the signal to the state that we had hoped to achieve by incorporating Green Means Go into a regional allocation of funding, while also allowing agencies to figure out how it best matches with their projects. The third change from the draft policy framework that was shared in March has not been discussed with the board before today, and that is a one-time reduction in the non-ATP funds required to compete in the regional ATP. The proposed reduction is from the normal 11.47% non-ATP funds to 7%. We are proposing this because we recognize that the region is facing a lot of economic uncertainty, and there is an anticipated reduction in all local revenues. We did not want that uncertainty to stand in the way of people putting forward their high-performing ATP projects. The state ATP guidelines do not require non-ATP funds as a match, but in the past we've required it at the regional level to leverage our limited ATP funds and to show local dedication to the project. The implication of this recommendation is that when the final funding list is approved, it would leave approximately $500,000 in the hands of local agencies instead of going towards regionally selected ATP projects. Otherwise, the policy framework is the same from the draft that was shared in March, and you can see these changes in strike through and underline in attachment A. The scoring criteria specifically are on page 3 of attachment A. We left the weighting for each scoring criterion and the evaluation process the same. The calendar that is included in attachment C is the same as what was shared before, since the board does not act on the calendar. Staff has been in contact with California Transportation Commission and know that they expect to release a revised calendar later this month. And once we have that information, SACOG will work with EDCTC and PCTPA to revise the regional ATP calendar and technical assistance offerings and share that information. So with that, are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is Saylor. I have a question.
Go right ahead, please.
So my question has to do with the 35% target and the 25% minimum. Could you describe a little bit more how those two different percentages will be applied in the evaluation of project rankings?
As it is currently presented in the framework, the 35% is part of how we relay the program to the local agencies, and then also how we will discuss the evaluation with the working group. 35% is part of what we're setting as a regional goal, but it is still identified as the scoring process changes by adding the 0 to 10 points if we were to not meet our 25% state requirements with the development of the funding recommendation. That said, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is the 25% of all of the funds in the program, 25% must be devoted to disadvantaged communities, or is it on an individual project basis that 25% of the project funds need to be devoted to a disadvantaged community as defined?
It's 25% of the total regional funding amount, so 25% of the $11.7 million that we would be regionally distributing. While we do have a regional target of 35% included in this policy framework, which was the result of a lot of discussion with EDCTC and PCTPA, we have never dipped below 49% investment with the regional funding recommendation in past rounds. The average from all of the prior ATP rounds that we have invested in projects that provide a meaningful benefit to disadvantaged communities is actually closer to 2/3 of the available funding, or about 29 million of 43 million that we have distributed through the ATP program.
In the map that displays the different categories or elements defining a disadvantaged community, most of the region is included in one of those categories or another. Are the categories all simply, so one is race, ethnicity, another is low income, another, so there's quite a bit of overlap in some of these categories. Are they all viewed equally?
For the purposes of the regional disadvantaged or environmental justice communities areas, they are viewed as part of a uniform layer of what makes you a regional environmental justice community. It is not that one has greater weight than the other, but it is more to show how different areas of the region meet that definition based on the specifics of the population in that area.
All right, thank you very much.
So Director Cabalden has his hand raised as well. Right ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there are 7 of us that aren't muted, just FYI. There's a lot of feedback. So if you wouldn't mind checking your especially non-video devices. So I have a maybe just a concern about the 11% being taken down to 7%. And the way it was described in the staff report was that this puts more money in local jurisdictions' pockets, but it's really $500,000 that's not going out for other projects. And what we've seen during this last month is sort of reinforcement about how important these elements of active transportation and are in every kind of community in the region, not just in providing support for high density development in downtown, but everywhere in the region. And so by this action, we would be removing projects from other places in the jurisdiction. I'm not convinced it's for enough of a benefit. So the last year Woodlands project on Gibson Road, this change would have saved them $24,000. Not significant enough for them to do or not do the project. It's $24,000 of their capital resources, not their operating budget that was affecting their police and fire or their food banks or anything else. So a relatively modest savings, but that would have meant an entire project or 2 or 3 not happening elsewhere in the region. And it just I'm not convinced. I mean, I really appreciate the intent here, but sort of doing these one-offs on one program at a time, rather than having sort of a comprehensive, what is going to be our response and our actions and our advocacy around the severe fiscal distress that this emergency and the governmental response is causing. We absolutely need to be doing that, but sort of taking this program all by itself and making that sort of change when it will result in fewer jurisdictions being able to make the kinds of modest but important investments in the physical and open space and trail infrastructure around in their communities. To me, I'm just not convinced, and it wasn't heard in committee in that way. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about why we think why we need to make that change at the last moment here.
Great, thank you very much for that. Victoria, if you would like to respond.
Okay. Yes, we were proposing that change because of the different concerns that we had heard from Public Works and other transportation-related staff about what the upcoming impacts are going to be and how it is very likely that they will have to contract either based on the funds that they're going to be able to put towards projects or that they would have to lay off staff. We were hoping that with the one-time reduction, which is, as you noted, it's 24,000. I don't know that it would necessarily be sufficient to keep a lot of staff members on, but it is to sort of lower the barrier to entry on this program as everybody is still figuring out what exactly the severity of the impacts will be. As far as what the impact would be on an exact project, for infrastructure projects, the average fully awarded infrastructure through the regional ATP is actually over $2 million. So we didn't anticipate that it would completely eliminate our ability to fund one project or to force projects into reducing in their scope to a point that it's no longer going to provide meaningful benefits. But it is definitely a trade-off of trying to provide some gesture towards local agencies now to ensure that they still submit their projects to compete, even as they are still figuring out what the impact is going to be on their finances for the upcoming years. Because we wouldn't want people to view the difference of committing an 11.47% non-ATP funding match, what the difference is in that, and have it convince them to sit out this round and not put forward their much needed local projects.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I could just add, just for staff, I mean, we agreed to cancel the Transportation Committee meeting for this month, where we might have been able to take up this policy issue. So I just, just as a matter of process, if we're going to make policy, this is a not trivial, again, perfectly well-intentioned approach, because we are all going to be facing this in our public works and the rest of our departments as well. But if we're going to cancel our meeting on the theory that we don't have any policy issues to take up, then we shouldn't be adding them unless they're, so anyway, I don't think I'm going to be able to support the item in this form, but I do wish we had been able to consider it more deeply in committee.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments and I recognize those thoughts. Other directors with comments or questions before we shift to public comment?
Chair Ferris, Vice Chair Samuela has his hand raised.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Hey, Chris, I really appreciate your point of view. And when I first looked at the recommendation, I thought, why not go lower? But I thought your point is valuable in the sense that it does reduce some benefits, throughout the region. Given that CTC is probably going to put together a new timeline, I mean, is there room to bring it back to the Transportation Committee in May? That's one question. And two, directly to Director Baldwin, is what type of advocacy do you see us being able to do to maybe talk to the feds, to the state, to add additional dollars to supplement or to assist us with some of the share portions?
Thanks. Thank you very much, Ricky. Yeah, Christopher, do you want to respond to that?
Although I defer to the Policy and Innovation Committee and the staff, of course. I mean, I think that there is at once both the real opportunity for potential infrastructure investments and additional resources, maybe from the feds. At the same time, also some significant threats to the underlying funding for those programs too. So we're going to be in a tactical and strategic bind where we might be able to pick up some additional dollars in some ways, but we're also going to be facing some pretty deep threats on our core capital budgets.
Yes, absolutely. Appreciate that. Just I'm looking, so I see, let's see, Don Saylor has his hand raised again here.
But can we, I'm sorry, could maybe staff answer the point about bringing it back to Transportation Committee?
I will definitely, I will, yes, thank you for that. I will definitely, just one second, Victoria. I will just like to get through some questions and then we can, but yeah, Don, did you jump in here and then I will.
I'm okay waiting to hear Victoria's answer, and I'll have a comment, not a question, when the time is right.
Okay. Victoria, sure, go right ahead.
Okay. To the question of whether there's option for it to go back to the Transportation Committee for further policy discussion, CTC did offer to give a small extension in submitting the regional ATP framework, but not long enough that we would be able to take it through our standard channels of the Transportation Committee and then to the May Board of Directors. So if there were to be an interest in having these comments incorporated into the final policy framework, it would also require the board delegating authority to the Transportation Committee to finalize the framework and perform all of the actions in the recommendation today. And
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So I don't have any other directors with hands raised at the moment. Are there other directors with questions they'd like to ask, questions or comments?
This is John Allard. I'll make a comment at the end if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, yeah, are there other, I'm not sure, at the end, like at the very end of the item or as a last comment from directors?
Well, I'll just go ahead and make it now then.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah,
this is
please
John,
do.
This is John Allard from Roseville. And I have an issue with the regional ATP increase in the investment target to 35% for disadvantaged communities. Let me first say, I am in full support of helping disadvantaged communities. However, what concerns me as we increase thresholds for disadvantaged communities as is being proposed here, what we do is we reduce the opportunity for non-disadvantaged communities to compete fairly for funding like this. And this is much needed funding. We have made trails a priority in the city of Roseville, as we have in South Placer County. And to give you an idea, these are numbers that I was provided by staff. Currently, the statewide ATP is already directing an overwhelming majority of their funding to DACs. And as was mentioned by Victoria, SACOG has been providing nearly 50% of their funding to DACs over the last recent funding cycles. So I think based upon the information, I do not see a need to increase the threshold or the target or whatever we're going to call it, which will in fact reduce regional flexibility and access to this very important funding. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you very much, John. Appreciate that. So Don, your hand is still raised in the sidebar over there. Is this an additional comment or question? Or was it from the last one?
Hi, no, I haven't made my comment yet, Mr. Chairman. This is Saylor. So I do think that that it makes some sense to have the reduced match, because the example, Christopher, that you made that you used for Woodland, that $24,000, I haven't done the arithmetic, but assuming that's the number, would have made a difference for Woodland, a small jurisdiction that has some challenges financially and is going to have even more coming up. So I do think the reduced match requirement may make a difference for small jurisdictions which don't have the revenue capacity to meet the requirements that they're going to be facing in the year ahead. So I'm in favor of that. I do agree with your point about the absence of a transportation committee discussion of this topic, and so that's unfortunate. But I would support the plan as proposed by staff, because I do think it makes good sense, and I think the investment in disadvantaged communities continues to be a need for our region. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. So we have two others at the moment with hands raised. I just want to do a quick check-in. So firstly, there is no, we have to have public comment, obviously. There is also no motion yet to proceed with this. If folks are interested in having it potentially go back to the Transportation Committee for a discussion, and then having the final authority from the board delegated to the Transportation Committee to have it submitted to the CTC, I would love to hear that from directors. So feel free to raise that. So at this point we have Director Galdo and Director Soon with hands raised in that order. Go right ahead, Director Galdo.
Thank you. I also have the concern that Director Allard mentioned, we have a history of overwhelmingly supporting and providing a majority of our funding to our disadvantaged communities. And certainly I've supported that, but I also believe there has to be a benefit to all communities. And because we have focused so much on our disadvantaged communities, I don't see any reason for us to go beyond the state requirements in this issue. And so I would support the 25% numbers as required.
Thanks very much for your comments. Director Soon.
Thank you, Chair Parks. Yeah, I would also concur with Director Allard's and Gallardo's comments. I think I'm all about supporting disadvantaged communities, but I feel that it needs to be equitable to allow everybody to compete. You know, fortunately or not, we don't have too many disadvantaged communities in our city, so this would put us at a disadvantage. But however, I do recognize the need. We need to invest in those communities regardless of what they are. Having said that, I would like to concur with your suggestion earlier, Chair Ferrix, about bringing it back to the Transportation Committee to allow that further discussion to occur there, and then have that be the governing committee to drive policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would second that. Director Slowey, go ahead.
Well, I would just second what Darren said, to bring it back. Transportation Committee, and then give them the final say in the beginning of next month, if that meets the timeline.
Yeah, so thank you, appreciate that. So I just want to, before proceeding to the public comment as well too, just wanted to, I couldn't quite tell if that was actually a motion or not. So just if there is one, and then Director Jennings also has his hand raised too. So is there, firstly, just to clarification, is there a motion from, either Soon or
Yeah, I'd make that motion, Chair Ferrix.
And I'll second that, Slowey.
Okay, thanks very much for that. We have Directors Jennings and Samayoa, or Vice Chair Samayoa, with their hands raised. Director Jennings, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was just, if it wasn't a motion, I was going to make it a motion. If it was a motion, I was going to second it. So therefore, I definitely support taking it back to the Transportation Committee as long as time allows us to do so.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And then Vice Chair Samayoa.
As one of the disadvantaged communities in the map, I'm okay with maintaining the 25%, and I think maybe part of the motion or part of the direction from this board is that the transportation kind of keep that in mind, that maybe that's a separate vote, or part of the vote includes that whether or not we maintain the staff recommendation of 35% or keep it at the 25%.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. So I'm gonna actually, there are no other hands raised. Oh, let's see. Yeah, Bonnie, go ahead, Director Gore.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I have a quick question. Oh, let's do this instead. And that is, there's the minimum of 25% for disadvantaged communities, but that doesn't preclude when we make the awards, or when the awards are made or the lists are made, that amount can't be higher, correct? Based on the projects that are proposed. So that's a minimum amount, but as those projects lists are being approved, more than 25% to disadvantage could actually come about as a result of the projects being approved. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, and that's been the past performance that we've seen at the regional ATP. Although it is difficult to discern how much of that is because projects compete first in the state, where they do add 0 to 10 points for disadvantaged communities, and anything that is unsuccessful at the state then competes at the region. So there's already a weighting of projects that feel they can demonstrate some benefit to disadvantaged community residents competing in the regional competition.
But with our projects in the area, we've had more than 25% disadvantaged for these types of funds in the past? Okay.
Yes, we have. The lowest that we've had is about 48, 49% in the 2015 ATP. In all other years, it has been a higher level of investment in projects that benefit disadvantaged community residents.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bonnie. So that is all I have for now. Director Zaragoza has raised his hand. Go right ahead.
Thank you. It seems from hearing everybody, and certainly my position is to keep it at the 25%. And that seems to be the consensus of what I'm hearing. I'm wondering if we just don't take a vote, as opposed to sending it back to Transportation Commission, just to do an up or down vote at the 25% as opposed to the 35%.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just don't want to have extra time, especially if we're under, a certain period, that if what I'm hearing is 25%, I would just assume go forward with a vote today. So if that's an alternative motion, I'll put it out there.
I'll
Okay,
second
so
the substitute motion.
And that was Kozlowski, I believe.
Yes.
Thank you. So I have a substitute motion for sort of proceeding today with the 25%. Director Balden, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I want to observe that several folks haven't spoken on this who might have. If the topic was final resolution of that issue, just knowing the debates that we've had in both at the full board and the committee for the last 15 years on the same topic, because it comes up in some form all the time, that I wouldn't necessarily interpret, 8 or 9 or 10 board members not speaking as unanimity on the issue. In my view, we still haven't resolved the other issue around the 11% and the 7%. Either, which does deserve. I mean, there have been good arguments raised on both sides, and it just needs more attention, that issue, and a deeper policy dive by members of the board. Although I have an opinion about it, I'm not committed one way or the other. But the committee does, I think, need to does deserve the opportunity to spend some real time that we can't do here on unpacking that issue.
Yes, thank you, appreciate that. And Vice Chair Samayoa, actually, I think he had his, looks like he voted. So I would just say, as the chair, I think, I appreciate the substitute motion being put out there in the discussion, and I agree though with some of the members of the Transportation Committee that there's still some issues. There are other components of the item that are still are deserving of a discussion. So my personal opinion would be, I think it would be good to see the item sort of given to the Transportation Commission or Committee, for further discussion, and then have it submitted still to the CTC, but allowing the final decision of the Transportation Committee to be what stands. So that's obviously just my opinion, but I don't know if there's other directors with comments, questions. Director Joyner has his hand raised, and then also at some point we just need to do a public comment. Thank you, Director Joyner.
Thank you, Lucas. I agree with Chris. I think there's more to be unpacked here, and the appropriate direction for us to take today is to send it to the Transportation Committee to do so. So I would support that action.
Great, thank you. Other directors with comments or questions at this point? Not seeing any other hands raised. So do the maker and the seconder of the substitute motion wish to either withdraw that motion, or would you like to proceed on an action on it?
I'll withdraw.
Thanks, appreciate that. So then there's no other public comment or no other comments from directors at the moment. So I'm just gonna go to check with staff here regarding public comment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this item?
Director Ferrix, I have not received any public comment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So we have, unless there are no other additional comments from members of the board, we have a motion on the table that would send this item to the Transportation Committee for a final debate and approval, and then off to the CTC thereafter. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any final questions, comments, or discussion on this motion? Otherwise, we'll move to a roll call vote. Hearing none, Lynette, if you could call the roll, please.
Thank you. Allard?
I will support the motion, but with the understanding that the Transportation Commission will take into consideration the comments that were raised about set aside.
Okay, thank you. Balden?
Aye.
Douglas? Director Douglas, could you indicate your vote?
Aye. Yes.
Flores?
He was an aye.
Okay. Chair Ferrix?
Aye.
Frost?
Aye.
Gallardo?
Aye.
Gore?
Yes.
Harris? Bankovitz?
No.
Jennings?
Aye.
Joyner?
Aye.
Kennedy?
Aye.
Kozlowski?
Yes.
Leahy?
Yes.
Lozano? New?
Lynette, I
Aye.
apologize for the interruption. I just bumped Lozano back into the meeting if you want to try to call his vote again.
Well, thank you. Director Lozano, could you indicate your vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
While we're at it,
New?
Director Harris is a yes. Maya was on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Director New?
Aye.
Onderico?
Aye.
Was that you on Director Onderico? Okay. Peters?
Yes.
We'll move on. Thank you.
Yep, yes.
Samayoa?
Samayo is a yes.
Sander?
Aye.
Zaragoza? Taylor?
Aye.
Chenier?
Aye.
Chloe?
Aye.
Stokely?
Yes.
Stallard?
Yes.
Soon?
Yes.
Pixa?
No.
Veerkamp? Okay. West?
Yes.
All right. Motion carries.
Great, thank you very much for that. We'll move now to item 8. It's the CARES Act Transit Programming, and Matt Carpenter is going to present the item. And then I would just also do a quick reminder to folks to please mute yourself if you are not talking. Thanks very much.
Hi, Matt. Can you verify if you can hear us?
Matt, you made it in the bottom left. Need to press connect audio.
And can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Well, good morning. In terms of background, this item is coming directly to the board for recommended action because of timing. We decided not to wait until the May board cycle because getting the funding to our transit agencies sooner would be very helpful for their cash flow. I'm sure that all board members know that this is a very challenging time for our public transit community. Since the coronavirus pandemic began, our transit providers in the SACOG region and across the country have seen a drastic decrease in revenue and ridership. They're also incurring unplanned costs for health and safety matters. In the SACOG region, the CARES Act is providing more than $135 million in funding through the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA. $23 million of the total is being directed to rural areas and small urban areas in our region. Small urban areas in our region include Davis, Woodland, and Yuba City, Marysville. The largest share of CARES Act funding is the $112 million that is coming to the large Sacramento urbanized area that reaches all 6 counties. The SACOG board is responsible for programming this share of the funding. The CARES Act funding is very flexible in terms of types of expenses it can be used for, but only transit agencies are eligible to receive it. Attachment B to my staff report offers details on funding eligibility and program implementation. In terms of process to shape our staff recommendations, SACOG coordinates with Caltrans, EDCTC, PCTPA, and public transit agencies to administer FTA funding across the region. Staff is supporting Caltrans in the programming of the $23 million in FTA rural area and small urban area funds. And for the $112 million funding share to the large urbanized area, the SACOG board is responsible for programming it. Eligible agencies and methodology are in a memorandum of understanding in place for the last 6 years, and the details are provided in attachment A to your staff report. Over the last 2 months, our SACOG team has been actively coordinating with transit agencies and community-based transportation providers. I really appreciate the contributions of Barbara Von Bechtold, Mike Rawson, Carolyn Payne, and Chris Doherty from my team, who have also been key partners on these coordination efforts. It's summarized in attachment C. You'll see that there are many active or planned emergency services by our public transit community to support the vulnerable populations that are suffering during this pandemic. The 4 elements of the staff recommendation for board action reflect the outcome from the analysis and coordination work with our transit operators. I'll now walk everyone through the recommended actions and take any questions or comments you may have. The first is just to authorize the $73.7 million in programming of the region's CARES Act from the FTA to the Sacramento urbanized areas by the amounts you see in Table 1. This is for the share that's derived from the core FTA Formula Fund program. The second action is to authorize programming an additional $34.4 million of the region's available CARES Act funding to Sacramento RT for the share that's derived from a program that only they are the sole recipient of in the SACOG region. The third element is to make the programming conditional on funding recipients continuing to support COVID-19 emergency transportation services in their service district through at least the end of the governor's executive orders for the crisis. And then finally, recognizing that this is a time to be creative with some of the partnerships and services provided, to make the programming of up to $4 million available for Paratransit Inc., conditional on that agency securing letter confirmations of funding support from the other transit agencies that would be contributing to that total. Details on that are in attachment A. A couple follow-up items will be that any fund balance that remains from the conditions unmet will be reprogrammed by the board through a later action. In addition, we will be coming back to the board in later months to show how these emergency funds were used by the service providers to help those in need during the crisis. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments on the item. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate that. So I see Director Cabalden has hand raised. Go right ahead.
Yeah, just a quick one. I'm very supportive of the item. This is a much needed funding for the transit agencies. As we in the country go forward, though, these funds are limited only to transit agencies themselves.
That is correct.
For those of us that have moved into a brokering role, so for example, we have our on-demand rideshare service is not provided through the transit district, it's provided but through a partnership with a private company. They're not eligible, and they are responsible for a little over half the trips in the city, but they're not eligible for any relief, and they're actually delivering as much, if not more, food than our regular transit system. So it's no one's fault. This is the Congress just acted on the framework that it already had, but as you know, as we provide advice going forward, thinking about updating some of these funding and relief measures to account for the new kinds of public-private partnerships and the operating environments that out there would be really helpful.
Excellent. I mean, and we are to that point definitely soliciting and gathering advocacy points for what policy changes we'd like to see in any subsequent stimulus that may come forward. As you know, there's active talk in Congress, and so policy provisions such as broader flexibility for funds that would be supporting these emergency services is certainly a federal policy point we could be advocating for in the later stimulus funding.
Great, thank you very much for that. Director Slowey has a hand raised. Go right ahead. I think you're still on mute, Director Slowey.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to move the item. I'm sorry.
Stallard seconds.
Great, we have a motion by Slowey, a second by Stallard. Are there additional questions or comments on this particular item? We'll go to, not looking through the list here, sorry. Not seeing any at the moment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this item?
I don't have any public comment, Chair.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that very much, Lynette. So if there are no additional questions, comments, or discussion from members of the board, we have a motion by Slowey, second by Stallard. We can proceed to the roll call. Thank you. Not looking through the list here, sorry.
Thank you. Director Allard?
Yes.
Cabalden?
Aye.
Douglas?
Aye.
Flores? Fairbanks?
Aye.
Frost?
Aye.
Rialdo?
Aye.
Orr?
Aye.
Harris?
Aye.
Jankovich? Jennings?
Jennings, aye.
Joyner?
Aye. And Christopher, I love the Lincoln Brand Feeds background.
I noticed that too.
Kennedy?
Aye.
Kozlowski?
Yes.
Leahy?
Yes.
Lozano, New, Director Anderko, checking to see if you're there. Okay. Peters?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, I got booted off.
Oh, sorry about that. How do you vote, Director Peters, on this item?
Yes.
Thank you. Samayoa,
That's yes.
Sander,
Aye.
Zaragoza,
Aye.
Saylor,
Aye.
Chenier, Chloe,
Aye.
Folksy,
Yes.
Ballard,
Aye.
Soon,
Yes.
Pixa,
Yes.
Veerkamp, West.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair Frericks. The motion carries.
Great, thank you very much. So we are going to actually just do a adjustment on the agenda here. Our workshop participants have a hard stop at 11. So we're going to move to the workshop. We're going to Kirk is going to have to keep working for SACOG. He's not going to be able to retire here. So we're going to push his resolution to next month's meeting. And then we're also going to still have an advocacy update with KP Public Affairs. Christina is checking with them right now, but we are going to move to the workshop item, Green Means Go, a place-based investment strategy. Jennifer Hargrove is going to introduce the workshop briefly and our presenters. And then of course our presenters are Alex Bockelman from MTC and Daryl Halls from Solano Transportation Authority. We're really happy to have them both with us today. Jennifer, go right ahead. I assume we're trying to patch Jennifer in.
Chair Frericks, I apologize. We're just having technical difficulties. I'm trying to promote her right now.
Thanks so much.
Jen, can you verify if you can hear us? Okay, we can't hear you, but we can see you.
Now?
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay,
Yep, go right ahead. Thank you.
great, thanks. Good morning, Jennifer Hargrove of your SACOG staff here to introduce our workshop item for today. As you all know, we've been pursuing our Green Means Go program for the last year. Green Means Go is our place-based investment strategy focused on our infill communities and specifically on what we've been calling green zones. The identification of green zones by your staff is going to be a critical component to making Green Means Go successful. So we're starting to work on a framework and a timeline for establishing those green zones to further our Green Means Go effort. The attachment with your staff report includes a high-level calendar for collaborating with your staff to get those green zones established by the end of this year. MTC has a program called Priority Development Areas, and it shares a similar strategy in designating areas that are priorities for investment. So to talk to us today about their place-based investment program, we have Alex Bockelman from MTC and Daryl Halls from Solano County Transportation Authority. Alex is going to kick us off today talking about the priority development areas from the regional MPO perspective. Alex has been with MTC for more than 2 decades, and since 2014, she's been the Deputy Executive Director of Policy there. She's worked in all aspects of the agency, and as Deputy Executive Director, she oversees the teams responsible for state and federal advocacy, community outreach, financial strategic planning, and long-range planning, including their long-range transportation plan and sustainable community strategy. After Alex gives us that regional view, she's going to hand the virtual baton off to Daryl Halls so we can hear a little bit from the local agency perspective on this program as well. Daryl has served as the executive director for the Solano Transportation Authority since 1999. The STA is one of 9 congestion management agencies and county transportation authorities in the Bay Area. They provide transportation planning projects and programs for road projects, ferry service, transit, and bike and ped for Solano County. So now I'll just hand it over to Alex. And both Alex and Daryl might be available for questions and discussion after their combined presentation, but we want to be respectful of their time. So we'll adjust for questions after we hear their presentations, if that's okay.
Yep, go right ahead.
Great. Good morning, board members. My name is Alex Bockelman, and again, I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Policy for MTC and ABAG. I'm joined by Mark Chorette, who's a Principal Planner in the Regional Planning section, just in case you have any really hard questions for us later. It is good to be with you virtually today to share the Bay Area experience with our Priority Development Area Strategy, and I also look forward to learning more about SACOG's Green Means Go effort. Next slide. Next slide. This slide highlights the 2-decade evolution of the Bay Area's regional growth framework. It started with a relatively modest but impactful grant program in 1998 called Transportation for Livable Communities that helped invest in communities near transit to help them become more walkable, bikeable, and livable. That evolved into the Focus program in the mid-2000s, where local jurisdictions nominated priority development areas near frequent growth. First 2 planned Bay areas adopted in 2013 and 2017. And currently, during the development of our 3rd planned Bay area, our sustainable community strategies, we have refined our growth framework based on lessons learned and to tackle the challenges of higher greenhouse gas reduction targets and the need to reduce the affordability burden on the region's households. Next slide. Next slide, thank you. The Focus program followed a 2-prong approach to shaping growth. First, it really focused both jobs and housing growth in areas designated as priority development areas, or PDAs. And second, it protected open space in priority conservation areas, or PCAs. For PDAs, these areas were voluntarily adopted by local jurisdictions to be planned for more housing in areas within walking distance of high-quality transit. For PCAs, the areas were nominated by cities and special districts and were regionally significant open spaces. There are approximately 214 PDAs, or I guess exactly 214 PDAs, and 184 PCAs currently. Next slide. This map gives you a bit more context of the Bay Area and the PDA program. The Bay Area is quite heterogeneous with 9 counties and 101 cities. It has a total population of 7.8 million. Some areas are quite urban, with the most obvious being San Francisco, but many areas are quite suburban and rural, including the North Bay, as well as much of eastern Alameda and Contra Costa counties. Daryl Halls will speak to the Solano County perspective to highlight how the PDA framework and the investment programs have worked in that county. Next slide. This slide summarizes some of the challenges we have had with our PDA program, likely some of the same that your cities face in the SACOG region. Weak markets have made investment in housing production harder. Uneven planning has happened to support development. We've had challenges with inadequate infrastructure to support development and wide variation in the transit and access in different areas. Next slide. In 2012, we launched the One Bay Area Grant, or OBAG program. The program was meant to start to address the investment part of the challenges PDAs were facing. OBAG strengthened the link between local transportation investments and regional goals for shaping growth and greenhouse gas reduction. It focused investment in PDAs, it rewarded housing efforts, and it provided more flexibility for local priorities. Next slide. So OBAG directs a significant portion of the region's flexible federal funds to invest in priority development areas. There have been 2 OBAG cycles. They've both been 5 years long. In the most recent cycle, nearly 400 million or 80 million annually has gone to the counties to support capital transportation investments aligned with the region's growth framework. The amount of money distributed to each county has been linked to population, as well as the RENA shares in terms of how much housing different cities and counties are taking, and actual housing production. The majority of the funding had to be spent in priority development areas or on projects with proximate access to PDAs. Next slide. The types of projects and programs funded by OBAG are shown in this slide, and it's important to note that OBAG really increased local flexibility to allow the counties and the cities to decide what types of projects were most important for supporting the development that was being planned for. So as you can see, the types of projects were, again, transportation for livable communities, bicycle pedestrian projects, streets and roads, projects, and safe routes to school. Next slide. Just as important as the capital investments has been the $29 million that the region has put into planning support. These funds have funded 70 PDA plans in the region, and these specific plans call for 100,000 plus new housing units, 130,000 plus of new jobs, and 60 million square feet of commercial development. There's also a companion technical assistance program, which is much smaller scale grants, but really are meant to help with implement PDA plans and to overcome some of the implementation barriers that local jurisdictions face in implementing their PDA plans. Next slide. We conducted a market feasibility study in 2013 to 2015 that found challenges similar to what I highlighted earlier in terms of political support, weak markets, and infrastructure adequacy. Since the study, we've seen regional investments begin to bear fruit in a variety of places across the region. PDA planning grants have created the comprehensive framework needed to gain community support and attract investment. Investments in transportation capital infrastructure and PDAs through OBAG have helped to implement projects envisioned by community members through their plans. We can't measure the precise impact of regional investment on development, but it is clear that plans and key infrastructure investments can help position communities to take advantage of market demand when it comes. Next slide. More recently, in 2018 to 2019, we assessed our PDAs, and this slide summarizes the report card. In terms of getting high marks, 75% of the PDAs have completed their plan and have adopted plans. The share of housing permits in PDAs are increasing. We've seen over this period 60% of the housing permits in PDAs, whereas before we started this, we only had 25% of housing in PDAs. Our OBAG shows alignment between the investments and our growth strategy, and we've seen stronger real estate markets in PDAs across the region. On the other side, getting low marks, many transit-rich areas have not self-nominated to be a PDA. Our housing production has continued to lag behind what we need, and low and moderate housing production needs have, trailed even further. Also, displacement pressure has been high in the priority development areas. Next slide. In the past year, we have used the information from our PDA assessment to make refinements to the PDA program to recognize that both transit-rich areas, areas with very frequent transit, and connected communities, areas with less frequent transit but still targeted for more growth and community investment, are both important to achieving our regional goals. So we have refined and expanded the PDA criteria in this regard. In addition, for our plan update, we are looking at adding high resource areas and other transit areas that have not been locally nominated as areas that should be targeted for growth. This direction is meant to address our affordability challenges, our equity goals, as well as get the region closer to our greenhouse gas reduction targets. We have also added a new designation called priority production areas, and that's really, it's new and it's sort of a pilot, but it's really meant to also designate areas that are good for production, distribution, and repair services. So that I think Daryl may speak a little more to that later. Next slide. Probably most important to the discussion is the fact that one size does not fit all. I assume that is true in the SACOG region and is definitely true for the Bay Area. This slide illustrates the different look and feel of the development that may accompany the growth strategy. Areas with very frequent and robust transit will likely have development that will have higher density, taller buildings, and be more appropriate for downtown urban centers. Communities with frequent transit service may see some mid-rise development, multifamily, and townhomes that may reflect the character in suburban job and housing centers. Communities with basic transit service may see townhomes and ADUs as being most appropriate for their unique circumstances. Next slide. In terms of looking forward, MTC and ABAG is continuing to hone our implementation. We are doing an assessment of our OBAG grant program. We are looking at updating our transit-oriented development policy. And probably most important and time-consuming is we are finalizing our third sustainable community strategy and really looking at the transportation investments and finalizing the growth framework. And next slide. Thank you very much for your time this morning, and I'll now turn it over to Daryl Halls to provide the Solano County perspective.
Thanks very much, Alex, for your presentation.
Board
Appreciate
members, Daryl Halls,
Daryl,
Executive Director of STA. So hopefully somebody's going to queue up our presentation here.
I'm working on that right now. Just give me one moment. Thank you.
No problem. So what I'm going to be talking about is how our county, obviously you got a good perspective from Alex on the MTC region, and we've been working on a lot of these issues for a number of years. So I'm going to try to give you an overview from a suburban county's perspective. So I think most of you know Solano County because we do obviously neighbor in Yolo County, and we've worked with Placer and some of the suburban counties on some initiatives. Next slide, please. But a little bit of context, a lot of the things Alex is bringing up, you got different counties in the Bay Area, just like you do in Sacramento and Sacramento region. And so our counties, a lot of agriculture, a lot of rural aspects, suburban aspects, and probably in the middle level and some of the density issues like in Vallejo and Fairfield. This just gives you a context of, we have 7 cities. We're primarily served by 3 transit services, the San Francisco Bay Ferry, the Capital Corridor that obviously we partner with your region on. We have 2 train stations there in Fairfield and Sassoon. And we've also been growing our express bus system, and our service actually goes from Sacramento to BART. We have the blue line that actually connects our 2 regions. Next slide. A little bit of history, because I think history is really important, because our county has actually had a good framework or a foundation for what we call orderly growth, having urban development be in the 7 cities, not in the county. How do we protect our open space, our agriculture, and try to focus? So we had a little bit of context before some of the regional initiatives. And so it was a little bit easier for us to kind of dovetail our history in with some of these concepts that MTC was bringing out. So back in the 1980s and 1990s, our voters actually passed an orderly growth initiative that would push the development just in the cities. The county really stayed out of the housing and job development business. And that was renewed by voters overwhelmingly in 2008. The end result is out of that the pretty expansive land, About 14% of our total land is where our 7 cities are. So you have 14% of the land. The other 86% is open space, water, agriculture, and 95% of our population is focused in those 7 cities. So that's kind of actually a good running start into PDA planning because we already kind of have a history of doing some of this. Next slide. So Alex mentioned a number of the regional plans. We tried to embrace some of those plans and bring those into the county level. It's all way back in 2003. I think a guy named James Cordes was involved in this toolkit. It actually was a partnership with Yolo County, the Air District, and Yellowstone Air District. We did a joint effort to try to help encourage cities to do community planning and gave them some ideas that were being fostered at the regional level. We did a TLC plan back in 2004. Obviously, SB 375 passed, and we did a sustainable community plan as a follow-up. We started focusing investment kind of parallel to the MTC effort as they were setting aside funds to actually implement PDAs. We focused on how we would invest those funds in the future. Alex mentioned that there is also planning on priority conservation areas. I'll talk about that. We actually did a countywide PCA plan in 2016. And we're right now updating our countywide plan, which of course feeds into Alex's regional plan. And for the first time, we're incorporating a land use chapter that brings together PDAs, PCAs, and what we'll call PPAs, or priority production areas. Next slide. So I think this is just an overview of kind of our perspective of PDAs, which Alex already covered. In 2008, we had 8 priority development areas in our county. That's grew to 13 by 2018. And then MTC ABAG has been going through another round. We modified 4 of our PDA boundaries. We added 5 new. So what's happening is the cities are gradually embracing these concepts more and more, and they're starting to actually add areas that they think would be good PDA candidates. As Alex mentioned, the North Bay counties, the 4 North Bay counties of Marin, Sonoma, Napa, and Solano, because we're more suburban, we were required to put 50% of our federal cycle or OBEG funds into PDAs. The other 50% were more broad. The more urban areas had a higher threshold. We're trying to encourage our cities next round to do better than that, get closer to 75%, if kind of try to move the needle a little bit. Next slide. So this is a map of where our current PDAs are. Obviously, they're all located in the cities. All the cities have at least one. Some of them have multiple. Probably the biggest growth area for PDAs is actually Vallejo, which has a lot of transit, and they've now really embraced the concept. So they've added PDA boundaries, but we've got them in all the cities in the county that we're working with. And you can see, I think real quick, the dots kind of hard to read, but you can see where our regional transit centers are, that there's kind of a good correlation between the regional transit services and the PDAs that are being planned. Next slide. In addition to the kind of the countywide effort, we've been working with our communities to really do TLC planning or PDA planning at the local level. So Alex mentioned that they had resources that they've been encouraging cities and local communities to do this. These are just a list of some of the TLC or priority development area planning that we've done the last 10 to 15 years. You can see there was a lot of work done at the grassroots level because that incorporates it into city general plans, helps you do specific plans, helps you focus on areas. So there's been a lot of planning work probably the last 10 years or so. Next slide. The other half of the equation is priority conservation areas, which we have a lot of, and our cities were really focused on PDAs. The county has a rich culture of preserving open space. And so we worked with MTC, the 4 North Bay counties, to identify that this was kind of a parallel issue, and they put together some pilot funds for the 4 counties to look at that issue. And so we used the funds to both do a countywide plan, but also to start investing in our priority conservation areas. Next slide. So those are just 2 examples. This is the Mancos Corners area, which is outside of Fairfield, which is kind of an agritourism area. There's actually a little restaurant there, wineries, et cetera. So some of the pedestrian improvements you see there were actually funded through PCA funds provided to us by MTC, and the county implemented that project. So we're trying to encourage the preservation of open space, ag, but also kind of agritourism, so that makes it viable. That's been some stuff we've been doing. Next slide. This is our most current PCA designations. MTC also went through an update of that. The dark shaded areas are the current PCAs, priority conservation areas. The kind of shaded area, the lighter area, are where the new PCAs. So we did some expansion, added some areas in, worked with the county closely on this. So that was part of the update. You can see what some of the PCA designations are. The city of Vallejo also, which has Mare Island, added some PCAs for the first time. It's really primarily a county issue. Now Vallejo's kind of joined the PCA party, if you will. Next slide. The newest designation, as Alex mentioned, is priority production areas. Very relevant to our county because we're one of the few counties in the Bay Area that's actually growing manufacturing jobs. A lot of the manufacturing, the high tech tends to stay in the Bay Area. A lot of the manufacturing has been moving east into Sacramento, into Solano County. And so we have a moving Solano forward economic study where we've identified where the key production areas are for. So the PPA designations are kind of right in our bailiwick, if you will. And so we've embraced that. We're working with our economic development group to identify what infrastructure would be needed to make those areas really attractive. And so that's kind of an ongoing, it's a new process, which is just starting off, but it's something that we're very excited about. Next slide. And this is a map of where our priority production areas. Again, we work with our cities. Because we had this economic strategy kind of dovetailed nicely, we already had a lot of identified areas that the cities were aware of. Next slide. Alex mentioned about planning in OBAG 1, which was early part of the decade. Getting the cities to embrace this concept was really critical because it was new. And so we funded 5 PDA plans. MTC set aside some planning funds. So Fairfield so soon took advantage of those and did PDA plans in their downtowns. We took a little bit of extra OBAG money that we were provided and helped fund plans in Benicia, Dixon, and Rio Vista. So 5 of the 7 cities actually did PDA plans. Since that time, the other 2 cities, Vallejo and Vacaville, have also done PDA plans. So all 7 cities now have community plans for PDAs. And then, as I mentioned, we also did a countywide PCA plan to try to bring together the county general plan with the overall goals of the county. Next slide. The next step, I think, and so it's been helpful having MTC's funds to foster this, but I think it's also important locally that as you have other opportunities, you look for new ways to fund this type of investment. So this is a program kind of similar to Placer, which I think has their fee program that we've worked with a little bit. We have a county facility fee that helps the county because they don't approve development, helps them develop facilities that support the whole county. So in order to have a focus on cities, there had to be a revenue source to help the county build jails, courthouses, et cetera. And so that's been in place since the 1990s, actually, when the Orderly Growth Initiative started. And so originally that was for county facilities. Next slide. There was a recognition, like a lot of counties, we've tried to pass a local sales tax, been unsuccessful. We've gotten close. And so our board, which is made of the 7 mayors and county supervisor, requested the county add transportation to the impact the public facility fee because it's such a countywide benefit. As development's occurring, we need to provide some of the infrastructure. So that was done back in 2013. So a percentage, we didn't actually increase the fee. We just carved out room in the county fee for transportation. And it's generated about $7 or $8 million. The fee's been in place for about 6 years. So it's a small amount of money, but it's flexible money, and it's allowed us to do a lot of different local things. Next slide.
So that's good.
So as an example, this shows you, these are all the projects that have been funded by the local public facility fee called the RTIF, Regional Transportation Impact Fee. The top half, the things that are completed, you can see when we first started, we really didn't look at PDAs. So they were just development related projects. They had to get done. They were infrastructure. The ones in progress now, we've shifted the focus to say, look, if we're going to develop, let's try to support the infrastructure in our PDAs because it supports transit, walkability. You can see at the bottom 4 that are in progress, 3 of them are located in PDAs. And the 4th one actually provides access to a PDA. Next slide. And the newest concept, and I think Alex alluded to it, is that there's obviously a key desire to produce housing, both just terms housing period, but also affordable housing. And so we've been working with MTC, with ABAG, with the state, with our 7 cities. So we've actually formed a partnership because our agency is really made up of our 7 cities in the county, and they need some assistance, particularly on affordable housing units. And our focus is affordable housing production in priority development areas. Very specific, very tough to do. Our county is really the affordable housing county. We export a lot of jobs to the Bay Area. Our housing prices are about half price of the Bay Area. So our challenge isn't building housing. Our challenge is building affordable housing for our workers and for folks in our community. And so that's what our focus is. We're helping our cities try to achieve the arena targets. So that's called the SOLIP. It's about 6 months old. We've already had again, thanks to MTC and Alex, they provide some pilot money, which we'll talk about in just a second. Next slide. It's called the Suburban Housing Incentive Pool. So MTC has been trying to incentive housing production. And so we applaud that effort. Suburban County is a little bit different dynamic. So we asked for some pilot money for the North Bay, which Alex and her staff supported. And 4 million of it is helping fund 2 projects in Solano County. One in Vacaville, which my board just approved, which is a 89 affordable housing units. You can see in the map, it's the green section. It's right in the middle of their Allison PDA. You can see where the transit center is. They've got market rate mid-density housing going in the red and the orange sites. And this will be the affordable unit in the green side, right by the, if you know where the outlet malls are in Vacaville, it's right behind there. It's where the transit center is for our express bus. And we're also working on a project in Fairfield near their new train station, 190 affordable units. And these are projects that they would have happened, but they would not have been affordable. So this is helping make them affordable right by regional transit. So it's really a new concept. We've just done a letter of interest to the other 5 cities. They're all kind of excited about it. So they want to start to work on their projects and see if we continue to foster some of those housing projects in PDAs. Next slide. I think that is it. And that's my contact information and my planning staff who did a lot of this work. I want to acknowledge all their efforts and happy to answer any questions, and thanks for the time.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much, Daryl. Appreciate that. So for members of the board, do we have any questions or comments for either Alex or Daryl? Kick things off. I'm looking for hands raised and such. Well, if you're not talking, put your phone on mute. And any questions or comments at all? Oh, Director Soon, go right ahead.
Thanks, Chair Ferricks. Thank you both, Daryl and Alex, for making the time today. I appreciate your coming out or coming to us virtually on this subject. Alex, I was just wondering that I noticed in your slide about communities that were rich in transit do not put their properties in PDA, and I wonder if you could elaborate that on a little bit more. It just seems a little counterintuitive for me. Do they feel that they didn't need to encourage development in those areas, or is there challenges of bringing transit to other areas?
Yeah, thank you. So that is one of the things when we did this most recent assessment that we found was that there were a lot of areas along some of our rail corridors that really had not nominated to be a PDA. And again, because the way that we've grown this program, we really did rely on voluntary actions by the cities where they wanted to see growth. And I think some of the communities haven't been as receptive to growth, but some of them are in areas where we have quite robust and frequent transit. So that's really, presents a challenge, especially as we try to do our plan and we try to meet our greenhouse gas emission targets. So something that we've been trying to obviously use our investment programs to incentivize. I'm getting
Hold
some
on one
feedback.
second, Alex. I apologize. So folks, if you're not talking, please put yourself on mute. So I can see a couple of folks still have their phones not on mute. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Again, so I think as we're trying to do this plan, we see that it's very important to try to get more jurisdictions to sign up to be a priority development area, to do the planning, to take the growth. We've tried to incentivize that through the One Bay Area grant, providing funding. But, there's still some areas where, maybe because of community opposition, other things, there's just not, they haven't yet raised their hand to want to be a priority development area.
You just highlighted something else that may be a difference in our 2 communities. Did I hear you say because of communities not wanting to grow, that there could be, that could be part of it?
Yes, some areas they want to retain sort of the character that they have right now and don't want to see more housing.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. That's just interesting because I I don't know that that's a shared sentiment or prevalent, as prevalent in this area. So it's just interesting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Darren. Additional items, questions, and comments for either of our presenters at all this morning? While we're waiting for that, I would just say, I think it's really, there are a variety of important themes, out of these presentations this morning, but, I think really some of the keys are that, this is obviously this bottom up, sort of locally driven, partnering with the counties and the regional, and then I think, obviously ultimately sort of trying to work with the state for funding. And, it's, I know it wasn't necessarily the easiest sort of process in terms of the adoption, but it's definitely, it seems like it's, I've certainly seen, at least in the Solano County examples, I've seen some of the, some of this work in action in and around the PDAs around, especially in the Fairfield, the new Fairfield Vacaville train station. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see some of this work underway in different parts of the Bay Area. So thank you very much again to the two of you for the presentations. Vice Chair Samayoa you have your hand raised as well. Go right ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Just interested in just curious to hear from either one of you, based on what you read or what your information you know about Green Means Go. What things are similar, or what things are you guys interested or piqued your interest on our proposed project of Green Means Go.
Well, I can go first, Alex, if you want to chime in, or vice versa. Well, I mean, I'm familiar with your blueprint process. As you know, Marty Tuttle used to be from our county, and Marty used to talk about it, and James talked about it. I talked to James Corliss a little bit about it. I think what's been helpful for us, and again, Alex is giving you the big picture, each county has to kind of embrace it in their own terms. Because I think in OBAG 1, a lot of this was new. In parts of the region, this was controversial. We were able to kind of explain to like some of the people that were probably resistant to it is, look, this is really things that you want to do yourself. You might call it something different because you have more liberal, more conservative elements of your community. There was a little bit of pushback in the region at the time. I think over time, though, as people have gotten used to it, gotten comfortable with it, seen the value of it, and it takes elected leadership. I mean, most of you know Jim Spearing, our PC commissioner, on the Capitol Corridor. He's been a champion from day one. Our mayors have mostly, for the most part, supported it as well. In round one of our cities was kind of holding out. They didn't like it. They were uncomfortable with it. They're now our biggest endorser. It was Vacaville, the one that actually did the affordable housing project, their PDA. So I would say they've gone a kind of an about face from being a little, kind of leave us alone to, we like these concepts, and they're starting to incorporate them. So it just took a little time though.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Any other directors with questions or comments right now? Otherwise, we will thank our presenters and appreciate you both again participating with us this morning. I know we were trying to have you out of here by 11, so thanks for staying with us a little bit longer. Great. Thanks so much to you both. Have a great day. Really appreciate your participation. So directors, we got about 15 minutes left before we're out of here at 11:30. And so we have just a few more items with us here. So our next item is item 10 on the agenda, the advocacy update with KP Public Affairs. And it's going to be a discussion regarding the Green Means Go work. Christina, go right ahead.
Thank you. Just sending a message to Renee that it sounds like Ed is having a problem connecting, but I will do an introduction and hopefully he will be able to join the audio. So pre-pandemic, we planned for an April board presentation from our state lobbyists, Vanessa Kahina, Brian White, and Ed Manning, all with KP Public Affairs. This update is particularly relevant now given our current situation. And so Ed, Vanessa, and Brian are going to give us an update on the current status of the state legislature and the impacts to their normal processes. They're going to give a very quick overview of about what we've accomplished so far based on our original plan with Green Means Go advocacy. And then they're really going to focus on how we pivot given the current conditions. Attachment A in the staff report is a memo from KP updating our Green Means Go strategy, and that will inform our conversation today. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Ed, Brian, and Vanessa.
Hi, Christina. This is Renee. I'm just going to interrupt for one moment. My apologies. We are still trying to connect Ed via audio, but Vanessa and Brian are live.
Okay. I guess Brian and I can go ahead and start in terms of where we are with the legislature and what's happening there.
Thank you very much.
I'm getting a
for doing
really
that.
bad echo. Okay, I'll try this again. So the legislature has been out of session probably for about 4 weeks or so. Today, the Senate Budget Committee will be having a hearing. What this has meant is that all committee hearings have effectively ceased. And with COVID-19, there is a lot more attention on the state budget and what can or can't move forward. I think part of the good news is that what we were looking at utilizing funds from on Green Means Go were set aside grant programs from special funds that have not yet been accounted for. So we still feel like we're going to be moving ahead on that, but we are expecting a pretty large shift in the budget and how the governor is going to be using the May revise to just reset where we are in terms of the state's fiscal outlook. So we're expecting what they're going to call a workload budget, meaning what they had introduced at the end of last year that went into effect, and if not, potentially more cuts. So that will come out around the middle of May. That is going to be just business, AKA get out of town budget. And then we will be moving forward into a little bit later in the year. We've been advised that a lot of these special fund programs, including cap and trade, which is where we're looking for a lot of our funding, are going to be pushed until then. Brian, Ed, I'd be happy to turn it over to you at this point.
Great. Is that, am I on? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, Brian, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. So as Vanessa outlined, the general dynamics of the legislature right now, we're really in kind of uncharted territory in terms of the process going forward. It should be noted that if and when the legislature does come back on May 4th, and that could change as well, the entire process for how we're going to move forward will change. And this includes both budget and policy related issues. The policy committees are likely going to narrow the list of type of bills that are going to move through the legislature, which means for all intents and purposes, a lot of activity will be done through the budget. That's good news and bad news for us. On the good news front, that means we have an opportunity to insert ourselves more into the budget rather than trying to rely on policy related bills. As Vanessa noted, that the workload budget for June, that will be the base load budget. They'll just do that just to meet the constitutional requirements for June 15th. But then in August, when they come back and do another budget that we're expecting based on the July tax revenue, that will allow us to insert ourselves in discussion about getting the Green Means Go funding that we have requested through Senator Pan. He is continuing to make this a high priority for his district, as well as the other regional legislators. And so we really just have to continue to press forward. And right now, I think the timing is key, because we have to make sure that the narrative, the actual messages don't get whittled down just because of COVID-19. Economic stimulus will be a big deal as part of the economic recovery. Green Means Go is a big part of that. So we have this opportunity right now, the legislature, to continue to impress upon our SACOG that keep this Green Means Go program in mind when you're thinking about economic stimulus. We have a plan to address that, and I think I'll send out an email most likely this week that will give you an example of how to actually cater your message to your local electeds. Vanessa, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Actually, I think Ed is on now, and happy to have him sort of move to how we're going to pivot and shift our messaging while we're dealing with an economic downturn.
And I appreciate, one sec, Ed, and everyone, just before you head out, I apologize, just 1 second. If we could keep it to about, 3 or 4 minutes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. I missed everything that happened. So going forward, the best we can say is the strategy that we have ended up being the right one, because we're looking at not general fund, but reallocating previously appropriated funds that are bond funds, mainly some general fund that was appropriated for grant programs that support housing and transportation. And so the key now is to try to remessage a little bit about the importance of those projects as infrastructure, public works projects that will help the region get back on its feet. The fact that we need those to facilitate transportation and housing. We need those projects now more than ever. And all we're asking for is our fair share of dollars that the legislature already put in various grant programs. So the money's there, and now's the time to spend it. And if you give it to us, we can spend it responsibly and quickly. The other thing that as many of you have helped us, and we appreciate it, we've met with our delegation, with members, several times. Some of them, we've met with the administration. We've met with everyone who'll allow us in our office numerous times. But it is a good time to have board members just reach out and remind members through email, text message, etc., and legislators, I should say, that this still matters and we still need their help. And really what we're aiming for is the August budget. That'll be the budget that they do once we know what our funding is. And that'll be the budget where there's an opportunity to hopefully make some changes to the existing budget, which is going to be on autopilot when they come back in June. So now's the time to sort of double down and try to convince them that they've got money sitting there, and getting it to us is a good use.
Great, thank you very much, Ed, for that, and also Vanessa and Brian. Are there any members of the board that have any questions or comments for the KP team? Oh, Director Cobalden has his hand raised. Go right ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And this is really just a comment and a request to our board leadership and to the Policy and Innovation Committee. We've been down this road before with this proposal and others, and I mean, even the story in the B earlier over the weekend, earlier this week, on the state's fiscal situation, the intense competition for even special funds from other parts of the state, particularly as a backfill for general fund and other bond funds that may not be available at the same level, is going to be intense. And as we have gone every time with some legislative proposal, our chair knows this better than anybody. The maxim inside the Capitol, which is do not fall in love with your proposal. And we should be very clear-eyed as we go forward that we are, for me at least, I think we should be cautious about committing ourselves that we're going to go all the way till the end. We're going to just finish this thing out when all the indicators are going in the opposite direction. So I support moving forward at this point, but I also don't want to get caught into the trap of feeling like, well, we've already spent this much time on it, we got to finish this thing out, when all of the indicators, even at the local level, I'm now serving on the national task force that's working on the massive testing, contact tracing, and self-isolation strategy. The costs at the state level and to us in cities and counties are going to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars nationwide, and very significant for each of us and for the state. we're just beginning to see the expenditure implications of the crisis. And of course, the revenue implications, both for our ability to match things, but also for the state, are pretty severe too. So just as we did with the last time around with a different firm advising us and helping us, and also at that point, like, we got to go to the end. It's just about the messaging. We've got a really good team on this, and I'm supportive of going forward. But I do think it's important for the management and the leadership of our organization to be very, very clear-eyed as we go forward about the investment of resources and our political capital if we're seeing signs that we cannot win on this.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Any other directors with questions or comments at all for the KP folks? So appreciate you. Very good comments, Director Cabalden. Appreciate those. I think there's a lot of accuracy to what you're saying. So thank you. We'll keep those items in mind and as we proceed. Additionally, any other? So thank you very much to the KP folks for being with us this morning. Really appreciate that. If there still are no additional questions or comments, I'm not seeing any hands raised and for board members. So we're going to move along now then to item 11, which is the update on 2020 May is Bike Month. It's Sabrina, and I'm going to ask for just we are 2-minute update or less. The item is in this.
Mr. Chair, we can move over this item. We've in the interest of time.
That's fine. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. There's an update in the board packet, and if others have questions, Sabrina, actually, we'll probably just do a follow-up report after the board on May is Bike Month anyway. So moving along now to item 12, which is the chair's report. Just one sort of set of items here for you folks. So James's annual evaluation is due and it will begin next month. The Strategic Planning Committee is going to meet on May 4th to approve the evaluation form and the timeline. Following the Strategic Planning Committee meeting, the board is going to receive the evaluation form and James's self-evaluation. And evaluation forms are going to be due back to the clerk of the board on May 12th. And then we are going to have a closed session at the next board meeting in May to work on and finalize James's evaluation. So just wanted to give you all that brief update. And then, so are there any questions on that at all? I know I went through that quickly, but any questions or comments from members of the board? Not seeing any hands raised. And then, so I will go now to item 13, which is the board member reports. If there are any board members that wish to give a brief status update on issues that are relevant to everyone, Director Kozlowski has raised his hand. Go right ahead, and then we're gonna move to James's executive director's report, and then get us to adjournment. We have Kozlowski and Soon. Go right ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment about the proposed STA project list that we've all had to consider recently. And I want to preface my comment quickly by saying that I appreciate the enormous amount of work that went into crafting that outline and the list and the implementation guidelines, but I have to take issue with a couple of passages within the implementation guidelines that I think are emblematic of a stylistic error that we make in crafting documents like this frequently. Particularly, I'm talking about sections I, J, and K, which use subtle or overly broad language to create a trap, that use contract style language in a misplaced way, and then restate requirements that are absolute. And specifically, section I says that projects shall not impair the ability of regions MTP to meet federal air quality conformity standards. That is both obvious, and the use of the word impair raises a standard that doesn't normally exist and is a trap that any project can fall into that has any type of increase to capacity to roadways involved. Item J, which has the MTP plan compliance, says the parties agree to develop mitigation measures. That, again, is obvious that you would have to do that and doesn't establish any kind of standard for what an effective mitigation is. And then finally, item K simply restates that CEQA is required and then modifies it in a completely unnecessary way by saying all necessary environmental review required by CEQA is required. It's obviously required. So I would say that given the opportunity to use a red pen on this, I would have struck all three of those. And I think it's a dangerous set of traps that we've created for ourselves for any project within the overall list. That all being said, I think the overall document is well crafted with those exceptions, and the list is good and it's generous to the city of Folsom. So I thank everybody for that. But I just think stylistically, we've got to be very careful about how we craft these things in the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Director Stu.
Yes, thank you, Chair Ferris, and thank you, Director Kozlowski, for that comment. I just want to, I was going to speak to that as well, and just in a general overview, what Director Kozlowski is referring to is Sacramento County Transportation Authority is considering a half-cent sales tax measure to put on the ballot in November in the name of economic stimulus, in addition to traffic relief and air quality and transit improvements. I'm pleased to report that it's continuing to progress through this process. We have one more hurdle to go through. Thank you, Folsom and Director Kozlowski. Your 5-0 vote last night continues to keep us on track. That the next milestone is a second vote on ordinance in May at the May board meeting, and then the decision, if approved there by 2/3, the decision will be at the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors to decide whether or not to go on the ballot. So that's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Soon. Any further board member reports at all? Otherwise, we will move along now to James's Executive Director's report, which will be brief, I know, and we will be adjourning in just a few minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Ferris, and thanks everybody for hanging in there this morning. I know it's not easy to do all of these meetings virtually and remote, and we'll keep working on both technology and how to streamline these. Two quick things. Director Soon mentioned Measure A in terms of an economic stimulus. Our KP Public Affairs mentioned Green Means Go in terms of stimulus. We've been partnering and working with a lot of public and private sector folks around the region to prepare for a possible federal stimulus. I put this in my update yesterday. Not at all a given, a sure thing, but a possibility. So you'll see something go out to each of you'll hear maybe from your public works folks across the region. We're trying to get a shovel-ready list. This might seem familiar, those of you that remember 11 years ago when we probably did this last time, of infrastructure projects, not just transportation, but water, sewer, flood control, broadband, relying on our partner agencies to identify those, working with the Sacramento Regional Builders Exchange, Metro Chamber, and others. So I mentioned that, but the stimulus piece is going to be an ongoing exercise to get some shovel-ready projects. And then finally, just to mention, we will be moving to committees. We will have all three committees and the Strategic Planning Committee, as Chair Ferris mentioned. All three policy committees in May will receive the transportation funding round policy discussion. I know that's of great interest to everybody. All three committees will get that in May. The Policy and Innovation Committee will get our first take on how the pandemic and the economic crisis is going to affect our budget moving forward, at least in terms of what we know. And then in June, we're preparing more of a deeper look in terms of our transportation funding statewide, region-wide, and the impacts on grants, revenues, sales tax, TDA, you name it. So I know the news is bleak these days, but I just want to say we really appreciate you all sticking with this board meeting, engaging with us, and please let us know how we can support you in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, James. So the last two items are just receive and file. And then if there are no other items from any member of the board, we will have this meeting will be adjourned. And we thank you again for spending 2 hours with us this morning. Appreciate that. I know how hectic of a time this is for everyone, and really hope all you and your family and loved ones are well. And we will stand adjourned until the next SACOG board meeting, Thursday, May 21st. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Lucas.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Lucas.
Appreciate it.
Great job.
Thank you, Lucas.
See everybody.
Great job. See everybody.